9731. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 9731. The bill was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall please designate the bill.
H.R. 9731, offered by Ms. Green of Georgia, to require the Secretary of Homeland Security to publish on a monthly basis the number of special interest aliens encountered attempting to unlawfully enter the United States and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with and is considered read and open to amendment at any point. I now recognize Ms. Green for the purpose of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will report the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 9731, offered by Ms. Green of Georgia.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with and the amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered base text for the purpose of further amendment. The gentlewoman from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes on her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since being appointed as border czar, Kamala Harris has undoubtedly been a complete failure in her job and has destroyed our country by releasing record-setting levels of criminals, murderers, rapists, and terrorists into our communities. Border czar Kamala Harris said, "Do not come," yet proudly welcomed over 12 million illegals from over 170 nations and territories, including over 2 million known gotaways who completely evaded U.S. authorities. Included in this 12 million are special interest aliens, also known as SIAs. Special interest aliens are individuals who pose a potential national security risk to the United States, typically from a nation that promotes terrorist activity or harbors terrorists. Under the Biden-Harris administration, there have been at least 73,000 special interest aliens arrested at our border. This does not include the potential SIAs among the 2 million known gotaways who weren't arrested and are now roaming American communities. I say at least 73,000 because the truth is that we do not know the current number since DHS does not publicly release it anywhere. In fact, the only reason we even have this number is because it was leaked to the press. Shocking that that's the only way Americans know. I'd like to remind everyone, it only took 19 terrorists to kill close to 3,000 Americans on 9/11 and wound more than 6,000 Americans. And to get an idea what 73,000 people look like, here is the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. This holds 71,000 people. 73,000, and we have no idea how many more, is how many special interest aliens are in the United States, and DHS does not report it. After 20 years of the U.S. fighting the war on terror, imagine how many terrorists would like to get back at the United States. The American people deserve to know how many and from which countries these potential terrorists are coming from, which is exactly what my bill will do. According to the former chief Border Patrol agent for the San Diego sector, prior to the Biden-Harris administration, the sector averaged only 10 to 15 SIA arrests per year. He testified, once word was out that the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went to over 100 SIAs in 2022, well over that in 2023, and even more than that this year. The number of special interest aliens has skyrocketed, and even more egregiously, this administration has tried to cover it up. The administration of Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Secretary Mayorkas told the chief Border Patrol agent that he was prohibited from releasing any of this information on the increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests. Prohibited. The administration was trying to convince the public that there was no threat at the border. They are complicit in covering up the complete invasion at our border. My bill would require DHS to publish on their website each month the number of SIA encounters and countries of origin. The American people deserve to know the number of potential terrorists Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have allowed to come into the United States. After all, the American people are the taxpayers. They pay to fund DHS and everyone that works inside the entire department. They fund the government, and they have the right to know who is coming across their border, if they're terrorists or not, and which countries they come from. I urge the committee to pass my bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Do any other members wish to be recognized?
Chairman.
Recognize the gentlelady from the great state of Illinois.
Thank you. It is a great state indeed. Thank you, Chairman. Look, this bill is another plea to stoke fear and push all the anti-immigrant rhetoric right before the election. I mean, let's make no mistake, this is the last committee hearing we're going to have before the election. But this bill will do nothing to improve national security. In fact, it would be giving bad actors real-time information about enhanced screenings our law enforcement is conducting, and this legislation would actually make our communities less safe. Rep. Green's bill would require CBP to publish sensitive national security information every single month. Essentially, it would be giving bad actors around the world real-time updates, folks, on DHS operations and intelligence reporting. This bill isn't about security. Last week at a full committee hearing, Republicans actually argued that Democrats were being misleading on border issues while trying to use some chart that had mistakes left and right, misinformation everywhere. I guess they believe that facts and statistics, let me say it again, are misleading. This is all to shield from the fact that this do-nothing Congress under Republican leadership has been the least effective, folks, since the Civil War. Is it any surprise that today, the last day we're in session, before the November election, that Republicans are bringing 20 bills to markup? Folks, there's no coincidence. Up until today, we've considered very, very little legislation, trust me. No one is fooled by today's actions. And it's been painfully misleading to listen to my Republican colleagues bash immigrants at every single opportunity they get. They've called them terrorists, criminals, freeloaders, other things that I won't mention that my colleagues here call them. They've spread dangerous lies around racist narratives about migrants that have affected our communities and our constituents. But folks, it's also misleading that Republicans have blamed the administration at every turn for an increase in fentanyl and a crisis at our southern border. And then up until really today, they've pretty much blocked any attempts to seriously legislate. Republicans can say that they're taking action to help people. But folks, the American people clearly see the inaction of this Congress. You can't get the votes. We're leaving today on a CR because you can't get your votes. I believe we should be taking up measures in this committee that actually help our communities. Measures like HR 1643, the New Deal for New Americans Act, which helps immigrants and refugees thrive, integrate safely, and contribute to our community. There are so many bills that we should be working on, but what we're doing here is actually helping terrorists get information to make our country less safe in Homeland Security. So this bill, all it does, folks, let me make sure that you hear this. All that this bill does, that the gentle lady from Georgia has introduced, is tip off terrorists by providing them the information to help skirt out security measures. And while doing that, she of course has to make sure that we stoke fears about immigrants in the process. This is a horrible, scary bill, folks. I oppose it, and I encourage the rest of us, if for no other reason, for the security of this country, to also oppose it. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from the great state of Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a co-sponsor of this bill, and I appreciate my colleague, Congresswoman Green, for bringing it forward. My Democrat colleague, whom I respect, has stated that Republicans are attempting to promote fear with this legislation. You just clarify for America, all this legislation does is require the Department of Homeland Security to publish the number of special interest aliens that they've encountered at the border. How many of these identified illegals that meet a particular description of a travel pattern? It's been clearly identified by past administrations before the Trump administration. SIAs were clearly described and identified. Meet a particular travel pattern that's suspicious. It's crossed the level of the threshold of reasonable suspicion. Like this is a special interest alien. All Representative Green's bill mandates is very simply for DHS to tell us how many of these guys they've let into our country. Does that sound unreasonable? The good lady said we're promoting fear, then by all means, quell the fear. If you've got control of this thing and it's like no big deal, it's all cool, there's no SIAs coming in, then publish a list and we'll be quiet. We're not promoting fear, we're promoting truth and transparency. Well, something everyone should want to know. How many of these people have come into our country, have been allowed in? And we're dealing with the Department of Homeland Security, in particularly the House impeached Secretary Mayorkas. That's been obstructive regarding release of data. CBP-1 app numbers, estimated getaway numbers, overseas processing of asylum claim numbers, illegals flown directly from overseas into the interior of our country numbers. Again and again and again, this committee has had a great deal of obstruction from DHS, who's given us clear numbers. It's a matter of public record. We've had many official letters requesting data with no response, follow-up letters, subpoenas for information and data. This DHS, this secretary, under this White House, has been quite obstructive to the Homeland Security Committee. So the gentlelady from Georgia has introduced a simple piece of legislation that, quite frankly, all members of this committee should support, mandating that DHS advise Congress and publish the number of special interest aliens that they've allowed into our country. And if it's not a large number, then my Democrat friends should be happy to see that number. I support the bill. I genuinely believe that Republicans and Democrats should support mandated transparency and truth coming from our Department of Homeland Security. I will yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Florida.
What I find interesting is that this term, special interest alien, was first coined by the Obama administration under Secretary Johnson. And so all we're trying to do is, how many have you encountered? That's it. I don't see why this is fear-mongering or anything. It's just information that is being gathered today and that should be released to the American people. So how many special interest aliens have you encountered at the border? Okay, fine. I mean, I don't see the big deal in this. And again, the term was actually coined by President Obama and his secretary. So I'll yield back.
Reclaim my time. Did the gentlelady, which time did I yield, Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the other gentleman from the great state of Louisiana, Mr. Carter, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try and steer this back into a nonpartisan discussion, because it's not Republican or Democrat. We're Americans, and we want a safe country. Representative Green's bill would require CBP to publish sensitive national security information every month, essentially giving bad actors around the world real-time updates on DHS's operation and intelligence reporting. DHS has never publicly released these numbers on a regular basis because the numbers are law enforcement sensitive and could give away crucial information to nefarious actors. This bill provides ample opportunities to tip off terrorists by letting them know which nationalities are getting an enhanced screening in real time and exactly where CBP officers and agents have been stopping these migrants. Criminal organizations could use this information to adjust their operations to try to avoid enhanced CBP inspections. It would basically tell the bad guys that they are in one of these countries. They should destroy their passports, get rid of their identification, and lie about their origins when they reach the border. That's not what we want. I think what we want is to make sure that we're giving every opportunity for our intelligence officials to be secure, get information, and block the bad guys. This notion of Republicans versus Democrats, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, has gone way too far. There's some discussions that we should not care about party. We should care about America. I can say without fear of contradiction that committee Democrats support greater transparency and accountability at DHS, but not at the expense of tipping off the terrorists and criminal organizations who wish to do harm to our country. I think we all agree with that. And some of these discussions and showmanship of one-upping the other to try and get a political point is counterproductive. It gets us nowhere. We should, in this committee, if nowhere else, should be talking about how we can come together to protect the interest of America. And my dear colleague and friend, Mr. Higgins, you're correct. We all do want transparency. But our approach is what we need to modify. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be recognized?
Mr. Carter, sir, can you elaborate how you believe that us getting the information on these individuals, the SIAs, will tip off terrorist organizations?
Sure. Any opportunity that we have, the more people who are involved in getting sensitive information, the greater chances that it will be leaked and that it will get into the hands of people that will be counterproductive for our safety. Anytime we expand that outside of the most significant intelligence leaders, we enhance the chances others to get that information, thus putting our people at risk.
One more question. Mr. Carter, do you feel like the American people deserve to know and would like to know how many SIAs are entering into the U.S.?
I think the American people would like to be safe and would not like to be put in a position to have information that might ultimately put them at greater risk. It's not about knowing. There's a lot of things that the American people don't know. There's a lot of things that are going on when there's investigations that would inhibit the ability to keep our country safe.
I reclaim my time. Thank you, sir. I want to hit that for a second. I don't feel like the American people, for a second, Mr. Chairman, feel like we're doing a good job keeping them safe. They've lost faith in this institution, and quite frankly, in this administration to keep them safe with what's going on at the southern border. I think they want to know how many SIAs are in this country. I think they deserve to know. And I absolutely believe that this committee needs to know as well. Thank you, and I yield back.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. I think my Democrat colleagues are confused. My bill will not release any type of personal identification of SIA, special interest aliens. And our government already reports known and suspected terrorists. We already report that information to the public. We already report those numbers. Reporting the numbers of special interest aliens monthly and what countries they come from, reporting that to the American people is transparency. This is not political. This does not attack anyone's identity or race. This is about the safety and security of the United States and the American people that pay their taxes to this government and deserve that information. How this is being portrayed by my Democrat colleagues across the aisle is completely wrong. This bill only provides the numbers once a month to the American people of these types of people that have known terrorist ties or have travel patterns through terrorist nations, and the American people deserve that. I yield back. Thank you.
Ms. Crane, you control the time. Gentleman yields back. Do any other members wish to speak on the amendment? Hearing none, it is now in order to consider amendment number 2 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Mr. Correa. The clerk will report the amendment.
An amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 9731, offered by Mr. Correa, number 002.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes on his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's clear to all of us here that all of us support transparency for the American people, and we must balance transparency with keeping our citizens safe. This bill will require CBP publish sensitive national security information every month, essentially giving the bad actors around the world real-time updates on DHS operations and intelligence reporting. DHS has never publicly released these numbers on a regular basis because these numbers are law enforcement sensitive and could give away crucial information to the bad guys. This bill provides ample opportunities to tip off the bad guys by letting them know what nationalities are getting in enhanced screening. This bill will let people know what nationalities are getting enhanced screening in real time and exactly where CBP officers and agents have been stopping these immigrants. Criminal organizations could use this information to adjust their operations and try to avoid enhanced inspections. And my colleague from Arizona was asking a specific question there, and I can tell you, sir, that this bill requires publications of the countries and the place that the actual encounters are taking place. This essentially will enable the bad guys to figure out where we are placing our resources. All of us support greater transparency and accountability, but not at the expense of tipping off the bad guys and criminal organizations who wish to do this country harm. My amendment essentially inserts a text of Senator Cornyn's Southern Border Transparency Act of 2023. Senator Cornyn's bill just passed the Senate by unanimous consent last week. It's something that all of us can get behind, and it will give the American people more information about what's going on at the border. Senator Cornyn's bill, my amendment, would require that CBP publicly share additional information on migrants who receive parole on a monthly basis. It would also require quarterly detailed public reports on the migrants encountered along the southern border and how CBP processes these cases. This bill would be the first time that DHS is required to publicly report on what happens to migrants after they are encountered by CBP at the border. The public would get to know how many people received and This bill will let people know how many folks are actually received and passed credible fear screenings, as well as to how many migrants were placed in detention, removal, or released into our communities. And none of this information in my amendment puts our national security at risk. If we are serious about our national security, we must be thoughtful about the data we make public. We need to make sure that we are not sharing sensitive information that bad actors could use to do us harm. In essence, the underlying bill will tip off for terrorists as to how to avoid enhanced screening and vetting by CBP. My amendment would keep Americans safe while still forcing DHS to be more transparent with the American public. And let me be clear, DHS has expressed security concerns with this legislation. That's why I'm offering an amendment, Senator Cornyn's bill, that passed the Senate unanimously just last week. And just an FYI to all of us, those 19 individuals that attacked us on 9/11 were not SIAs. They're visa-holding immigrants. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you. To my friend from California, to the committee, I'll say something that's probably going to shock my Republican colleagues here, but I urge everybody to support the language that you are advocating for. However, not in the form of this amendment. This already exists. The language of this amendment already exists. And Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me, I'd like to enter this into the record, which is kind of strange because it's already in the record. H.R. 6523.
Be admitted without objection.
The amendment that we're considering here, and I totally agree with it, I'm glad to know, but I'm looking at the co-sponsor list, and there's not a single person on this committee on the other side of the aisle. It's a co-sponsor of 6523, which is the exact language of my good friend, Mr. Correa's.
Would gentlemen yield?
Sure.
So my good friend from Texas, you've been to the SCIF. I believe we both have been to the targeting center here in Washington, right outside. And all of us signed documents saying you shall not disclose the information on the individuals on that special interest list, where they come from, what they're being targeted for. There's a reason we signed that document, because that's sensitive information that I believe DHS uses to target and protect our country. I'm not sure why we would want to disclose that information. And I would offer...
Lou, let me reclaim my
Okay.
my time on it. I agree with the language that you're offering as an amendment, but I think we should do both. That's Ms. Henson's bill. She's the co-sponsor, the companion bill to Cornyn's bill in the Senate. It's 6523. It sounds like everybody's in favor of that. I hope that you will co-sponsor it by the end of the day, because that's already being considered. It was a UC procedure. Not a single Democrat in the Senate objected to it. But let me explain. So I'm glad to know that we're going to have support.
Will you yield?
Let me explain my rationale for SIAs. It took months in this committee to get this administration to release the KSTs, known or suspected terror numbers. And we now know that there were less than 20 in the 4 years that President Trump was president. But we also now know, thanks to the efforts of this committee under the leadership of Chairman Green and the pressure that was applied to the administration, that there are almost 400 people who match the KST list, the known or suspected terror list. When we talk about classified information, I'm glad you brought that up. The reason that we classify certain information, this is classification, these are national security. Classified information is done so to protect sources, tactics, techniques, procedures, and other information that leads you to the sourcing of that material. Law enforcement sensitive, however, is something completely different. But the numbers and even the countries, the American public is screaming for this information. And this is personal to me. This is personal to me. Because over 2 years ago, I had a sheriff call me from Kimball County, Texas, and he said we had a special interest alien, and much to the chagrin of our other colleagues that have said that this is somehow a term of defamation. No, this is not. Department of Homeland Security says that this is a non-U.S. person who, based on analysis of travel patterns, potentially poses a national security risk to the United States or its interest. Our country deserves to know this number and where they are from. I'll give you 20 seconds because I'm going to take back that last minute.
Just all of the above, but understand DHS has concerns with this legislation. I would offer our colleague from Georgia to go back and work with DHS to come up with some language that they can accept.
I'm going to take my time back. You're right, and that's not surprising, and that's the reason that we impeached Mayorkas, because we don't see eye to eye on the security of our country.
You don't trust our men and women in the front lines?
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about,
Yeah, that's
I'm sure
DHS.
it's not surprising. It's not surprising that DHS has a problem with this because the information
No,
is
well-
damning. It's absolutely damning. And we have SIAs coming into this country at a number that is overwhelming us. It is
We
absolutely.
have a worldwide
questionable.
refugee challenge.
Will the gentleman yield?
This is an issue for all of us to address, not as DSRs,
The
but
gentleman from Texas.
the American public
The gentleman from Texas controls
are
the
relying
time.
us in our good work.
Ms. Correa, the gentleman from Texas controls the time. Thank you. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Yield to my colleague from Georgia.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you. I'd actually like to inform you that DHS does not have a problem with this bill. As a matter of fact, they gave input to the committee about this bill and made suggestions, and we added them. So it is a complete falsehood that DHS has a problem with this bill. I yield back, Mr. Pfluger. Thank you.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's
You
time.
didn't take
the
all
gen-
of their suggestions, ma'am. You didn't take all of their
the gen- the
suggestions,
gentleman-
just some of
The
them.
gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from the state of New York, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for this important discussion. I want to thank Congressman Correa for bringing this amendment to the floor. I'm fully supportive of this amendment. It clarifies what we're trying to do here and keep our borders safe. It's bipartisan. It's a strong alternative to what's been proposed that, if not amended, would put our country at risk. And so we need to move forward in a way that increases transparency, increases communication, and does not tip off terrorists around the globe that wish to do us harm. And this is a bipartisan approach. So I think we should take this amendment by Mr. Correa into consideration immediately, vote it up. Let's do it in a bipartisan fashion. I've seen this committee do bipartisan work before. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Does the
I yield
gentleman
back.
yield back? Gentleman yields. Does any other member wish to be recognized? Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Georgia.
Thank you. I think it's very important to understand that the CBP website already releases the terrorist screening data set. That information is already made available, and that does not hurt our government's ability to locate and track down terrorists. These are numbers. These are numbers. Telling the American people the number of special interest aliens coming across our border and what countries they are from every single month does not hurt our government's ability. It doesn't tell our enemies any information.
If the
What it does,
information
it
is
tells
there,
the
then
American
it's no need
people
for
what
a
a
bill.
bad job this government is doing. That's what it's transparency. It tells the taxpayers
And
and
there's
the
no need for
American
this
people
legislation, ma'am.
that, you know what, I support the legislation you're trying to introduce, and I support it separately. But playing politics and trying to cover up for the failures of Secretary Mayorkas and the Biden administration's DHS by introducing an amendment and trying to replace my bill text with another bill is disingenuous, and it
Will you yield?
shouldn't be done. No, I'm not yet. No, I'm going to keep talking. There's something also important that people need to know. We had a hearing in here, and one of our witnesses, Aaron Heitke, who was a retired chief Border Patrol agent, he quoted simultaneously, in San Diego, we had an exponential increase in special interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. Prior to this administration, the San Diego sector averaged 10 to 15 SIAs per year, 10 to 15 per year. Once word was out that the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went over 100 SIAs in 2022, way over 100 SIAs in 2023, and more than that this year. These are only the ones we caught. At the same time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests. The administration was trying to convince the public that there was no threat at the border. End quote. This is what a retired chief Border Patrol agent said, Aaron Heitke. He said he was told he wasn't allowed to release it to convince the public that there was no problem. That's lying to the American people about the threat that they live under every single day. And introducing an amendment to replace this bill text continues the lie and the cover-up. Lying about the numbers, not names, not the ability, not how they tracked these people down, not how they caught them, not how they arrested them. It's just telling the number. And the American people absolutely deserve that number, at least once a month, from the government that is supposed to protect them. The federal government has a duty to the states, all 50 states, a sworn duty in the Constitution to protect the states from invasion. This government has completely failed to do that. And your amendment, Mr. Correa, is another effort to cover it up. Mr. Chairman, I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Do any other members wish to be recognized? Mr. Goldman, do you wish to be recognized?
Thank you.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield to Mr. Correa.
To my colleague from Georgia, all of us here are for transparency. Cover-ups don't work. Eventually, you get to the truth. The sooner the better, especially when it pertains to the national defense, security of our citizens in this country. In this situation, ma'am, you took some of the amendments, but not all the amendments or the language that was recommended to you by DHS. All I'm asking is you pull back and let's talk national security. I've been to the targeting center, like all of you, I'm sure, have gone there, to address SIAs and their characteristics and where they come from. I would like to speak more, but I signed a contract that said I cannot disclose. But the bottom line is, what we want to do is come up with some good common sense legislation. Senator Cornyn is moving in that direction. I would say we take the lead and continue to work with him. Love to go back and talk to DHS about what you accepted and what you didn't accept. Always balancing information, transparency with national security. And I have to tell you that I trust our men and women at DHS protecting our country. And they are the ones that make the final decision as to what we should know, what the public should know, and what they need to know to make sure the bad guys don't game us when it comes to deploying our resources at the border or any other places internationally. I want to yield to my colleague, Mr. Carter.
It appears that your obsession is more with Secretary Mayorkas and Biden than it is with safety of the American people. No one is disagreeing that we want to have the information. No one is disagreeing that we want our national security people to go after the bad guys and to make sure that we are following their movement. The difference is you want to put our people, our law enforcement agents, at risk. And to make a point that is a political point to demonstrate your angst or displeasure with Secretary Mayorkas, fine, you have that right. You do not have the right to try to hoodwink the American people into believing that you want to do what's in their best interest when truly what you want to do is to grandstand and to try to further shame someone that you think didn't do a good job. I'm not here to defend Secretary Mayorkas, but we all are here to defend the American people. I yield.
Mr. Carter, you yield back to Mr. Goldman. Mr. Goldman, you control the remainder of the time.
I do.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Do any other members wish to be recognized? The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Crane.
I just think it's pretty disingenuous. Nobody's trying to, nobody has an obsession with Secretary Mayorkas. Yes, did we want to see him impeached? Absolutely, because of the job that he was doing. But let's be honest, and Mr. Pfluger said it well. One of the reasons for the classifications that we put around things is to protect methods and sources. By releasing the numbers, not the methods at which how we caught them, or the sources that tipped us off or led us to information, we're not releasing any of that information. We're just trying to illuminate the numbers, not only to this committee, but to the people that we're here to represent, that have lost trust in our ability to protect them. So, you know, I support, you know, Lou's, my good friend from California, you know, and his efforts. I just don't think it has any part in stripping out the
yield for a brief
language in Miss Green's bill. I want to yield some time to my friend from Texas.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman's recognized.
Okay, so that makes, so I see the friction point between the classification levels and the department's sharing of that information. Mr. Crane's statement makes sense to me, so can we have a discussion, please?
Sure. But this bill also.
I yield to you, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you.
I mean,
Mr. Latrell,
Thank you, Mr. Latrell. This bill.
let me interrupt. Mr. Latrell, you need to yield back to Mr. Crane, and Mr. Crane
Yeah,
wishes
Mr. Crane,
to
I
yield,
just-
and I'm happy to do
I'll
that.
yield 10 seconds to Mr. Correa.
This legislation also requires that you tell them where they were caught. So what you're saying is, you're telling people on a monthly basis where you're targeting, where most of your apprehensions are coming from.
But that doesn't, Mr. Correa, that doesn't divulge method or sources. Just telling people where they were caught does not divulge methods or sources, right?
And Mr. Crane, I guess we're going to disagree on this one because I'd rather go back to the experts, which is DHS, to say, what do you feel good about disclosing? What don't you feel good about disclosing?
Well, Mr. Correa, would you admit that they have a political reason to not want these numbers released because of the increase in numbers of SIAs that are coming in under this administration?
Eli, Congressman Crane, the men and women at our front lines, I don't believe are motivated by politics.
I agree with you, sir. And I think most people on this committee agree with that. We're not concerned with the men and women on the front lines. We're concerned with leadership that is going to take the accountability, and they're going to take the incoming for the rise in SIAs coming through the southern border. That's where we have the problem, sir.
Very quickly, I'd like to invite a couple of you to go with me to the targeting center so you can hear. So you've been, so you know SIAs are not all the same. There's a lot of stuff there. But, you know, how high up to the politics? I'm not defending Mayorkas.
Yep.
I'm defending the frontline folks that are actually doing the job. And I think that's where we have the disagreement. Is this stuff, this information proper to disclose or not? That's really the issue. I'm for disclosure. Ms. Green, I'm with you. I just don't know if this information is proper. That's where I go back to DHS. And we have a question of fact here. My colleague from Georgia says she worked with DHS. Our information is you didn't work completely with DHS. And that's where I think with the question of fact pops up.
Okay, well, I respect you, Mr. Correa. I know we're going to have a difference of opinion here. Mr. Latrell, did you want to say something? Okay, I yield. Ms. Green?
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. I'd like to enter for the record, Mr. Chairman, a tweet from May 29th, 2024, just some months ago, by Chief Jason Owens, stating U.S. BP agents in Santa Teresa, New Mexico, apprehended 6 special interest migrants, aliens, from Morocco. This is exactly what my bill does.
Without objection, it be entered into the record.
Thank you.
Do you yield back to Mr. Crane? Ms. Crane, she's yielded back to you. You control the time.
Yes, I yield back.
Mr. Crane yields back. Any other members wish to speak? The chair recognizes at this time the ranking member of the committee, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Let me say that the Correa Amendment, which adopts the Cornyn language, which is already passed, if we pass it, requiring the reporting requirement as listed, then we can move this bill to the floor in short order and have the necessary reporting completed. So I would support the Correa Amendment and the reporting, which is basically the same language that was adopted on the Senate side by the Cronin Amendment. And if you want to say any more about your amendment, Ms. Correa, I yield back.
Ranking member yields back. Do any other members wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, if there's no further debate, the question is agreeing to the amendment and the nature of a substitute offered by Mr. Correa. So again, to be clear, this is the amendment to the amendment and the nature of a substitute. With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please, with no. In the opinion of the chairs, the noes have it, and the amendment to the amendment nature of substitute is not agreed to. Mr. Ranking Member.
Ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested pursuant to Committee Rule 7C. Further proceedings on this question are postponed.